We'll go ahead and get started. I want to thank each and every one of you for coming out this evening. My name is Joe Geiger. I'm the Director of Archives and History, and this is our Thursday evening lecture series. We do have a couple of others that are already scheduled. On March the 15th, Rebecca Park will be doing Ruby Bradley, so we'll look forward to that on March the 15th.
Now, Joe, you asked me to do Jemima Boone.
Yeah, remember?
Well, why does it say Ruby Bradley on the website, I guess?
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah. Jemima Boone will
the
be.
daughter of Daniel Boone,
Okay.
who will tell all.
We will change that on the website under upcoming lectures and workshops.
That was probably the erroneous information that I was given.
My apologies.
Thank you.
And on April the 19th, we have Nat DeBruin, who's the archivist at Marshall. He'll be coming to talk about photograph preservation, and that's actually how you preserve your physical photographs. So that should be very interesting and enlightening. So we'll look forward to that as well. But tonight we're going to talk about, Randy, where did I do with this thing? The Hoot Owl, yes. And that the dates for the Hoot Owl have been set. And for those of you who don't know about the Hoot Owl, it's an event that begins at 6 o'clock on Friday evening, April 6th, and people pay $25 to actually spend the entire night doing research in the archives until 8 o'clock the next morning. And believe it or not, this place is packed. We usually have about 50 people in here spending the night. We had one poor fella a couple of years ago, a young man who came here. He probably was, 11 or 12 years old, and he was real energetic and researching his family. And about 5 o'clock in the morning, we found him back there by the food, kind of passed out, and people walking over top of him. But it's a real nice event, and people tend to talk to one another and share stories about their family's history, and oftentimes they find that they're related to one another. So yes, the Hoot Owl event, April 6th and 7th. Tonight we're going to talk about, and we don't want that to power down, so we'll tell that to go away. We're going to talk about archives and history, and you probably know that our primary mission is to preserve the history of West Virginia. We've been around since 1905, but we do a lot of other things, and that's really what I want to talk about tonight. Before we get started, let me make sure I have this turned on. There is a quiz that we have to pass before we get going. That's actually a proclamation the governor issued in October for Archives Month. That was very nice. And this is our quiz. Question number 1, what is the state animal of West Virginia? Black bear, C. Final answer, yes, that is correct. Question number 2, and I changed this one just to be a little trickster. Not who was the first governor of West Virginia, but who was the second governor of West Virginia? That's a tough one. If I put initials up instead of the word Daniel, his name was DDT, Daniel Dwayne Tompkins Farnsworth, and he served for a grand total of 7 days. Arthur Borman left the governor's seat to go to Washington to be a U.S. Senator, and Farnsworth was president of the Senate, so he actually filled in for 7 days. We got a really cool letter that he wrote to his parents during this time period, saying thank you, Mom and Dad.
You knew it wasn't going to be Carlisle.
You knew it wasn't going to be Carlisle. That's right. He wasn't a popular man in West Virginia. On February 18, 1905, the West Virginia State Legislature passed an act creating the State Bureau, which was first headed by Virgil Lewis. I kind of gave away the answer, and it's kind of self-explanatory. Yeah, archives and history. Archives and history. And Virgil Lewis, actually, as Pat Mcclure knows, his painting sits right back there in our office suite. So Virgil's with us every day. Archives, of course, a lot of what we do here is based right here in our library. People come here to do research about their family. We have people that are writing dissertations and papers about things. And so our library is open 9 to 5 Monday through Saturday, and then we're open until 8 o'clock on Thursday. So we actually have quite a few hours that we are open to the public for people to come in and do research. And probably, other than the materials that we collect here, our staff is probably one of the greatest assets that we have. You have a lot of knowledgeable folks that if you come in here and you really just don't know what you're doing, they can help you. We have these exhibits that we put up in our library that kind of show off some things. This particular one was on World War I. And then we have photograph exhibits. Everyone who walks out of our state museum walks right through this little corridor that has those signs up there that talk about this photo collection being from the West Virginia State Archives. Again, hopefully as a way of encouraging people to donate materials to the archives. Our lecture series, of course, we've had some very good speakers. We have a series in the summer, the block lecture series, that features a lot of speakers relating to the African American community here in Charleston, and that will be expanding this year. History Day. History Day is 1 week from today, and History Day is a huge event. Actually, Mary Johnson does all the planning for this event, but it's to enable people to let their legislators know we want your support. We're important to our communities, to our counties. We want your support. So usually we have anywhere from 50 to 70 groups that set up in the Capitol, that put up displays. We also have History Heroes. That's a picture of Pat Mcclure and I from last year, I believe, Pat. History Heroes are those persons nominated by local historical societies and organizations, basically to honor someone who's done great work for their group. It's a once-in-a-lifetime award. It's a pretty big deal. And there's Hoot Owl that we talked about. Welcome to Alcatraz. I love that. That was a sign that one of our staff members drew up. Golden Horseshoe Database. We actually have written questions for the Golden Horseshoe for probably 16, 17 years. Mary works on that now, working with the Department of Education. That's a really big deal. You know, the Golden Horseshoe, first awarded in 1931. We have a database that lists all those winners. You can go in and search by county or search by year or whatever that you want to do. This is something, and we'll see the quick quizzes and the daily trivia a little bit later, but the History Bowl is something that was established by Commissioner Randall Reed Smith, really utilizing these daily trivia and quick quiz questions that we have for 8th grade students. They're basically quiz bowl competitions. You have 4-person teams. They have their buzzers. The first round of play is 30 questions, and anybody buzzes in and gives the answer. The second round is a team round, and at the end, the team with the most points, of course, wins and advances. We have regional tournaments. We have a state tournament. This is the 9th year that we've done it, and it's really it's really a great thing to see the enthusiasm that folks have just preparing, and really the knowledge that they gain from competing in these competitions. We also do the Highway Historical Marker Program. You're probably familiar with these signs. This program started in 1937. There are more than 1,000 of these markers across the state of West Virginia. We got federal funding to refurbish or replace about 350 of these. And you'll notice they have that silver color to them. If you see the newer markers, that silver paint. It's actually called white aluminum, but it's supposed to last a lot longer. So about 350 replaced or refurbished. And then we got funding for a sesquicentennial marker program that listed that we got 160 new markers relating to the Civil War or statehood. Each county got at least 2. But these markers were again funded by federal funds, and you'll see them actually, they're going up. There's one down there at Magic Island, a couple down on the boulevard there on the west end of Charleston that have gone up already. This is the Veterans Memorial Database. Let me show you this one actually. I'm going to try to pop in and out of our website just to show you some of the features that we have. This is the Veterans Memorial Database, and again, we did the research for the names that appear on the memorial. There actually were a lot of mistakes, a lot of names that were carved that shouldn't have been. There probably were, after our research, an additional 1,000 names or so that were added to the memorial. And if you remember, somebody tried to drive their car through at that time, so there was damage to it. It was an opportune time to get it right. So actually, Archives and History staff spent several years going through all of the state's newspapers, looking for, you know, those things where maybe someone had been born here in West Virginia, moved away when they were 6 months old, and then, you know, when they died during the war, their grandmother or their aunt or somebody put this notice in the paper. And so we were able to verify that they indeed belonged on that Veterans Memorial. So you can search here. You can go to the Veterans Memorial database, and you could go to, you know, World War I, World War II, for example, and just look for all those persons from Hancock County, for example, who lost their lives during World War II, and you can see quite a few. That's a huge number. You could actually click the last name field up here and put them into alpha order, and then if you click on any of the individual records, you'll see all of the different fields that are there for each of these soldiers. So again, we try to keep that up to date. the Veterans Biographies. Now, this is something we had been doing a few of these over the years, but we were blessed to have Pat Mcclure, who's sitting back here, is a retired West Virginia State professor who took this on, very passionate about writing biographies of veterans. She's done, I don't know how many of these, but she's also done a couple of things in recent years that really might bear some fruit in the future. We were talking a little bit about this. She has school groups, advanced placement classes from George Washington High School, who have taken these on as projects. Their teacher, Kathy Bush, these folks do the research, they write the biographies, and then actually we've had them here doing presentations on what they had learned and the work that they had done. And I think that's such a great project for young people today to be able to go to those primary sources. And again, that's what our focus is here, is those original source documents and being able to go back to those. And that's so important. Whether you're buying a house, whatever it is you're doing in life, you're going to be taking, resources and making a decision based upon those. Civil War medals. The Civil War medals were given to West Virginia Union regiments, to members of those regiments. No Confederates got them. If you're a West Virginian who served in an Ohio regiment, you wouldn't have gotten one. But most of these were distributed after the war. But there were several thousand that they weren't able to find them. So actually these medals were eventually turned over to the archives office. And now we have a project. If you want to pass those back through there, these are actually medals that are individualized. That's what makes them so unique. People start with themselves. They might show their birth record that shows their parent, and then they go to their parent's birth record and they trace them back until you hit that soldier. So you basically prove your connection to that Civil War soldier. And it's, as I said, each one of those medals, if you turn them onto the rim, you'll see the soldier's name actually carved onto them. So each one of those is individualized. The Archives and History Commission, kind of an oversight body, we do quite a bit of work for them. The Records Management and Preservation Board. Now this board was established to help county governments manage and preserve, obviously, their records. Think about it. When you're born, there's a record created at the county level. When you buy a house, there's a record created at the county level. Your wills, just anything like that, records being created. And over time, of course, those records are accumulating, and counties don't have room. Those courthouses weren't built to hold records. So anyway, this was established to aid them. We've given out more than $4 million in grant funding. Denise Ferguson back here is our county records archivist. But we've done another thing as well. We've been involved in a statewide, what we call a statewide preservation project, where basically we're bringing county deed books into the archives and scanning them and being able to give those digital images back to the counties, because let's face it, the next generation, when they come into a courthouse, they're not going to want to pull that old dusty book off a shelf. They want to walk up to a computer terminal and type in a name, and there it is. But that electronic records, that certainly is an issue. And I'm not going to dwell on this, but for example, we're used to taking a governor's photographs and sticking a box on a shelf. You've got all these prints, or you take the negatives and you stick that box on the shelf and you walk away. In 100 years, if the conditions are okay, you can pick them up and look at them, right? Now, Joe Manchin handed us external hard drives with 420,000 images. We can't take that hard drive and stick it on a shelf and come back and expect to access those things. We have to actively be involved in preserving those records. Mary Johnson oversees our electronic records program, and it is we know that world is here, but it's a little bit scary. Scanning paper records is not the end of the preservation, it's the beginning. Let's face it, everybody says, why don't you just scan it and throw it away? When you scan the record, that's just the first step. You've got to continually keep that record alive, again, not for 10 years or 50 years, but forever. That's quite a challenge. And that takes us to the other end of the scale, microfilming, which we actually still do. Thank you, sir. Let's see that. We actually still microfilm all of the state's newspapers. I'm sure most of you folks have seen microfilm. When I show, when I ask about microfilm to the school groups that come here, it's like it's a foreign language. This is microfilm. Essentially what someone has done is taken a picture with their foot. He actually has a little foot pedal, but he takes a picture of that, and this gets developed, And this is what we call eye-readable. You can hold it up to light, you can magnify this, and you can read it. Machine readable, of course, is what those digital files are. So it's a different world. For now, as long as we can still do microfilm, we'll do that. We'll continue to produce that. It's a dying technology, and we recognize at some point we're going to have to make a decision on what to do about newspapers. As I said, right now, there's our main man, Harold Newman, sitting down there cranking out the microfilm. And that's kind of the finished product. You see the boxes there, and they go in the drawers. Dick does duplication. Dick Faust has overseen that program for many years. But you see down in the right-hand corner what's coming down the pike, and that's essentially those scanners. They're microfilm scanners. So instead of printing out a page, you're going to be saving a PDF, save it to a thumb drive or something. This is our website, and I'll try to touch on a couple of things as we go through this, but again, I want to just note, usually the easiest, what I tell people to do is just go to Google and type in WV history, and we're usually right there near the top. You'll know you're there when you see Welcome West Virginia Archives and History. The vital records, most of you have probably accessed or used our birth, death, and marriage records. They're fantastic. You can just, one of the few states where you don't have to have any kind of membership. You can just come on here and just go to searching. I always do this, and I probably shouldn't, but if we go here, there's Hank Williams. Now you'll see we have two different images there. If you click on that top one, what that is the county death record. If you go to a county, they're going to have a county death record book. And if we scroll over there, you can see that second line. There's Hank Williams. Died on January 1st, radio singer, 29 years old, and Dr. Diego Nunari. Now, if we go back over to the state one, there's actually a good bit more information. If you look at this particular document, this is the actual state death certificate. Again, a lot of the information, what's his residence. There's a specific residence. There's the hospital that he was taken to. He was a radio singer. There are his parents' names. There's the person who gave the information. There's the doctor noting that the patient was dead when first seen. He being transferred down to Montgomery, Alabama. And then you can see the cause of death there. It had the same thing in the county, but down here underneath it does add that line, due to acute alcoholism. So that wasn't on the county record. So again, these are fantastic. You could really just spend a lifetime kind of looking through for your family history records there. This is something we started, daily trivia questions. We have that, I'm sorry. The death records come up, we have to keep a 50-year buffer on that, so the 1967 deaths should be there. I think we only come up to about 72. That'll be the end of the deaths. I don't think we have anything beyond that. I may be mistaken. I'll have to ask Deborah about that. And then the births, we keep a 100-year buffer on that. This daily trivia, as I said, we have 8th graders who have to take West Virginia history. So I was trying to think of some way when I was doing the website many years ago to bring them back on a daily basis. It didn't really work out well, but nonetheless, we got started with this daily trivia question. Again, putting up a question, people could put their name on there, they could put the answer. Mary has to be very cautious when she posts the answers the next day because, as Andy Park knows, school students could be a little tricky trying to slip a certain name or phrase in there as their submission. Nonetheless, we turned those daily trivia questions into quick quizzes. And this, again, was the foundation. It helps in terms of prepping for Golden Horseshoe, but it was the foundation for that History Bowl competition. Again, we focus on 8th graders because they're there. They're there every year. They're taking West Virginia studies. But our overall focus is on providing educational opportunities for students of all ages. And this is one of the things that I always point out in terms of these quick quizzes, is that learn more. A lot of these, when these students go there, they're just looking for the answer. It's just memorization, let's face it. But for those persons who want to learn more about the Golden Delicious Apple, you click there and maybe you see the legislation, maybe you see photographs, newspaper articles, whatever it might be. Same kind of concept for this On This Day in West Virginia History. We took something for each date and again, build it around primary sources, videos, photographs, whatever it might be that we had in our collections. YouTube, we have a YouTube channel. In fact, let's do that real quick. This is one of my favorite things. We have a, we have a YouTube channel where all of our lectures are on. And we actually have a YouTube music channel that we just started about a year ago, I think, Dick, that has a lot of the Vandalia recordings, a lot of that old time music. So people really love that stuff. But this is actually on our website, some of these audio video files. And I don't know if I'll get this to work, and if it doesn't work, we'll stop right away. But this is one of my favorite videos of all time. You remember Natalie Tennant, of course, was Secretary of State, but she was also something before that. She was the first Mountaineer.
By day, Natalie Tennant's been working in the Secretary of State's office.
She interned in the
journalism
Secretary of State's
major
office.
won the right to carry the gun and wear the leather outfit after winning a cheer-off at a WVU basketball game. She made her debut last spring at the Blue and Gold game, hearing lots of cheers and jeers.
The protest helped me somewhat because it keeps me going. It doesn't let me get a big head.
She's been getting in shape to become the first female Mountaineer.
I was a mascot in high school, so I always thought that it would be a nice idea to be the Mountaineer, and I enjoyed being the mascot. But when I was a freshman is when I first thought about trying out for Mountaineer. I didn't know that a woman could try out or that you didn't have to have a beard.
And now Natalie's practicing and thinking about that first time she takes the field with the Mountaineers.
I have former Mountaineer friends, and they say that that's the greatest feeling that you'll have, Natalie, when you run across the field and shoot the gun.
And you'll be able to run across the field and shoot the gun?
Oh, yes, yes. That's why I'm getting in shape this summer to do it.
Perfect.
Shoot it?
Yeah.
Steve.
What's
can't
this
get
guy?
to this.
Thank you. Just like every Mountaineer, Natalie now has her name etched on this gun. And on
Go
opening
ahead
day...
and shoot it now. No, shoot it toward Steve? You okay?
Now you know why I'm a buckeye.
I think that's classic. Anyway, there are all kinds of video files. I just showed that one because it's kind of funny, but there are a lot of early video files here. Voyager Online Catalog. This is for our books. You know, if you're looking to see what kind of books that we have in our collection that might help you in your research, you can actually go there and search remotely. Teacher resources. Again, this is one of my favorite pages. Down here in particular, and I'm not going to try to pull it up, but Mary Johnson created this fantastic graph that shows population in West Virginia by county. And it breaks it down from the first census in 1790 all the way through 2010. And looking at you know, I always look particular at McDowell County. And you look at McDowell County in about 1940 or 1950, and the population was about 96 or 98,000 people. And here we are today, and it's dropped to like 22,000 people. And just to watch that, you know, to be able to see that, and it's certainly for teachers, it gives them something that students can think about. Why did that happen? You know, what were the causes behind that kind of thing? Like McDowell County. Oh, I'm sorry. On this teacher resources page, I'm sorry. Mary, if I'd be polite, I would click that link and show them exactly what we're talking about. This is the teacher resource. I'm going to show you the online resources by county. Actually, I'll just go ahead and show it since we have it up. But this is what I was talking about specifically, the West Virginia Census by county and race. And again, if you looked at the very top, that's West Virginia itself. But McDowell County, the one I was talking about, if you scroll all the way over here, you can see that it's the top lines that I'm looking at. And you can see up to 68,000, up to 90,000, up to 94,000, up to 98,887. Then you drop to 71, to 50, to 48, to 35, to 27, and down to 22. I mean, that's stunning just to look at those figures over a 50, 60-year period, the drop in population. So you could do that for each county and see the changes that have occurred. I'm not just picking on McDowell by any means. Online resources by county. This is another great thing that Mary created. You know, you could go to whatever county it is and click on it, and you can see the resources that we know that are already on our website. Again, some of the Veterans Biographies. These are some of the ones that Pat would have done, or earlier than Pat. Anyway, the online exhibits, we have a lot of really cool online exhibits. And again, the whole purpose is those primary source documents. We did ones on statehood. If you want to know how West Virginia was created, boy, you can go right there and read. Again, not what Joe Geiger thinks about it, but about the actual words as they were deciding on what the name is going to be, what they're going to do about slavery. You can actually read those things. Mary Johnson did one of the great one on John Brown. We did one on the 1960 presidential campaign when Kennedy and Humphrey and those folks were all here. Sesquicentennial, we did a lot of projects relating to that on our website. A lot of, again, primary source material. We had a teacher who scanned several thousand Union militia letters that we put online. We did a timeline where, again, every day we found primary source documents. History Center is where you find anything relating to history on our website. And again, I'm not going to try to take you through this, but it's usually easiest to find it by category. If you're looking, for example, on early settlement and conflict, you can come down here. You can find, we saw the George Washington document. Let me see, George Washington Journal. There's a journal of Christopher Gist as he's coming down the river. Washington Notes. You can come down and Point Pleasant documents, actually primary source documents on the Battle of Point Pleasant. French and Indian War primary source documents. You can see maps. You can see different things, again, that we have in our collections. The Internet's really changed everything in two ways for us. It enables us to put primary sources online, to share things with folks that we weren't able to do before, but it also enables people to find out what we have, because our collections belong to you. They belong to the people of West Virginia. It's our responsibility to process those, to make them available, and a big part of that is letting you know what we have. So that, again, is a big focus of what we do. But History Center is where you find out materials. If you want to find out every legislator, if you want to read all the biographies of the governors or their inaugural addresses, things like that, History Center. State Archives is where you find out the collections that we have, the materials that we have upstairs. Map collection. We have a large map collection. And again, probably about 60% of these maps, the ones that belong to us anyway, have been digitized. You can look at them online. Yearbook collection. We had a gentleman by the name of Clay Hamilton who surfed eBay for years and spent thousands of dollars buying yearbooks and then donated that collection to the archives. We add to those. People love yearbooks, and they tell so much. Family and local history. You've got it both there. So we actually have a list on our website of all of the yearbooks that we have. If it's St. Albans High School, it'll tell you if we had what years that we have. Telephone directories. We have a large collection of those upstairs. And city directories. If it's a larger community, oftentimes these city directories have a wealth of information. Where people lived, what they did, who was their neighbor, what businesses were on that block. State documents, all kinds of different things involved there, from our, the governor's materials that come into us, to the House and Senate journals, acts of the legislature. These things right here are actually license plate things. And we saw a photograph in one of the collections we came across from like the 1930s the other day, and there are photographs of this car that was wrecked. It was part of a lawsuit. And there's the license plate number. And we could go right here in this book and find out, we could find out, I don't know if that's a big deal or not, but we have had requests before from somebody who had an old car, an old license plate, and said, can you tell me who owned this? By golly, we can. Photograph collections, we have a large number. I'm not even certain how many photographs we have in our collections, but a massive amount. Special collections, those might be architectural drawings. They might be, as you see here, cartoons. We talked about James Dent. There's some James Dent drawings right there. We actually have closed things as well. This is from the John Slack collection. This was a collection of what they called memory books. There are about 23 of these things, and it was an archivist's nightmare, because essentially some secretary just glued every letter and every photograph into this book. But at least they were kept. At least they were preserved. And this particular page, I pull it out too much, but this particular page has a letter. The top letter is from President at the time, Lyndon Johnson. The second letter is from Vice President Hubert Humphrey. The third letter is from Secretary of State Dean Rusk. And the one right down there on the bottom right, you can see the Edgar Hoover part. That was from FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover. So I thought that was so cool. They're all right there on the same page. This is something I went up to Detroit and picked up at the beginning of November. She was noted as being perhaps the most important African-American woman in West Virginia from 1940 until about the mid-60s. She was an extension agent, and she worked statewide, putting on presentations and things. This little case that we have up there is actually a part of that. We have, if I clicked on that, it would take you to the finding aid for that collection, and also about 50 samples from it, different documents, different photographs from that collection that we thought might be of interest. There are a couple of those. As I said, she's involved in victory gardens during World War II. There's a lot of World War II materials that are in this. Very interesting from the home front perspective. And in fact, as I said, there's a woman who is writing a dissertation, and she is coming in and utilizing these collections. Jennings Randolph, you might have heard of this guy, right? Randolph came in as a congressman in 1933 and then came in as a U.S. Senator in 1958. He came in and was sworn in at the same time. We could see we actually provided a picture of Dick. I don't know if it was 60 Minutes or Meet the Press or somebody that used that picture of Byrd and Randolph being sworn in by Vice President at the time, Richard Nixon. So Randolph, that's a pretty impressive collection. It took us just a little while to get processed, but you can see if you go to this page now, it's broken up by series. There are over 900 boxes in this collection. And if you click on this comprehensive finding aid, and this is kind of what I like best. If you lived in Lewisburg, for example, and you want to know, is there anything that I know there's a folder title for it? Well, you could just do a search on Lewisburg and go through here. There he is at the dedication of the State Fair in 1965. There is some kind of magazine. There's a speech he made in Lewisburg in 1972 on the Greenbrier Valley Hospital. He was in the U.S. Senate during a time in which you saw government grow, in which you saw, Johnson's war on poverty, in which you saw a lot of federal dollars going into West Virginia, and Randolph was involved in a lot of that. And that's one of the things that oh, thank you. Yeah, they keep wanting to shut me down. I'm sure you guys will be saying the same thing in about 10 minutes. But anyway, just a fascinating collection. We will have this case will be replaced with Randolph material, and we'll have a photo. Mary's already done one photo exhibit that we've put online. And we hope to have some kind of dedication ceremony for the collection, I think probably on West Virginia Day this year. That's what we're looking at. Jhansi Norman. You guys recognize that name at all? Jhansi Norman. Probably some of the folks in here in Charleston might. The fellow on the far right here was Jhansi Norman Sr. He was one of the first architects in West Virginia, one of the first black architects in West Virginia. Designed a lot of the buildings that are still around, particularly at West Virginia State, but throughout West Virginia, primarily in the Kanawha Valley. The woman next to him is his wife, Ruth Norman. She was a teacher and educator for about 50 years. She apparently was a legend. And she also had her own radio show for about 32 years here in Charleston. She taught Leon Sullivan. She taught Tony Brown. Tony Brown, who did Tony Brown's Journal, with public broadcasting thing, did a show that was called We Love You, Mrs. Norman. So obviously she had a great impact on people's lives. Their son, Dr. Jhansi Norman Jr., was a pioneering heart surgeon during the 1960s. He was our past West Virginian of the Year, and just a fascinating family. Probably, if not the most, one of the most prominent non-political families in our state's history. There you can see Mrs. Norman doing a little teaching, and there she is at the radio mic. So, other things that we have as part of our archives collection, we have governor's papers. This particular book, actually, that top entry shows the very first action taken by the state of West Virginia. June 20th, 1863, that's our governor, Arthur I. Boardman, taking the oath of office, getting ready to roll. And we have governor's papers all the way through our most recent governor, Governor Earl Ray Tomlin. His papers have been processed and are available. Naturalization records. Again, when people came into this country, oftentimes we have these records where they came to a particular county, sometimes with photographs, but they really tell the story of their past. Secretary of State records. Now, I didn't blow this one up. This was one of my favorites, and I meant to pull this particular one down. We got a bunch of records from the Secretary of State's office. When people filed for office, they had to fill out these forms. So one of the folders that we had was for President of the United States in 1984. Now, one of the guys who filed as President of the United States, we had we have Gary Hart in there, we have Walter Mondale, Jesse Jackson, the names that you might recognize. One of the guys you might recognize his name, but not for politics. Larry Bozo Harmon. Bozo the Clown, the original Bozo the Clown, on his letterhead filed to run for President of the United States right here in West Virginia. But he wasn't the winner of the strangest one. This guy, Wilford D. Coyote, he basically, he's trying to get put on the ballot, and he says that I want to be exempted for the fact that many of Mr. Coyote's supporters are wildlife, animals, and birds and cannot read and write the English language. This is a guy filing for President of the U.S. as well. So you just never know what you're going to run into when you open up one of these folders around here. He was not in prison, that's right. Monongalia County case files. Denise has been very active. We're trying to get records, original records from counties, and we've been very successful. These are county chancery and law case files that go back to 1832. They're the original case files, and there is gold. Constance Baston, for months, worked on creating a list, so you can actually go to that particular page and see every case file that we have in that collection. I'm not saying you can see the case file. You can see a list of the cases that we have in the collection. Lewis County records. This is something we took in from the county clerk's office, and their earliest marriage records, their earliest deeds and wills, just some really nice records. And what we found, we have a volunteer who's been working in here on Thursdays, and she was just telling me today, she's doing 1820 as an example, or as kind of a sample page, right? So if you go now, you can search for marriages for Lewis County from 1820, and you're going to see what we have. And those entries came from that marriage record book that they have in the county. You open it up, that's where the marriages are recorded. What we have are those individual pieces of paper. Marriage bonds, marriage applications, the marriage license, the minister's return. And what she found, I think there were 31 that were listed on that book for 1820. She found 14 names that weren't on there. So, that's very, very important. These marriages may not have been recorded. As we go later on and we see that most of these things, even when most of the information is now transferred over, and those early marriages don't show the parents, but again, these early records that we have do, so that can be added. But even as you get later on, you'll find Denise has pulled out something here that the minister noted they got married at the house of the bride's sister. Now, in that marriage book, it's going to say in Weston or in Lewis County. But right here, they're telling you specifically where they got married. I just think that's so cool. There again, that's part of the process. That's how it works. We basically take the rough records. In this case, we're flattening them out so that people can actually access them. And then we put them in acid-free boxes or acid-neutral boxes, and that's how we store them on the shelves. That's again a kind of a listing. That's the first box. That's just the first box. And my goodness, yes, you're right. That is just great stuff. Doddridge County. We also went to the county clerk's office there and took in their county clerk's earliest records. Marriages, wills, deeds, again. All kinds of good stuff. And that's kind of what they look like. They basically come in these metal shut cans. We pull it out, transfer them into the boxes. Then we bring them back here and start doing the work. That's actually one that Denise found the other day. That's the oath of office for, what did you say you thought his name was? Phineas Gano, mayor of West Virginia in 1881. And that's actually establishing the voting district there the same year. Richi County records. Now this is another cool one. And I have some of it sitting right out here. And before you leave, make sure that you look at this long piece of paper, particularly the head of it that's closest to us up here. Counties, when they destroy records, or state officials, when they want to destroy records, they have to go through us. We look at their retention schedules. We make sure that it's okay for these records to be destroyed. And of course, when we get that, what we do also is look to see if those records have any kind of historical value. When I got a request from Richi County that had something about an 1844 poll book, my eyes probably got pretty big. And I probably jumped in the car right then and took off up there after these things. It looks like what happened was they cut these books apart. So they used to be in a book form, but they're not anymore. What it is the voting record for every election from like 1844 to about 1888. What does that mean? Who cares? Well, it shows you exactly how people voted. And, this is good stuff. The one that we have over here, it's actually the 1860 election for President of the United States. As we know, here in Virginia at the time, Lincoln was not a popular guy. He got less than 2,000 votes throughout the whole state. But this particular one, in fact, of all these voting sheets, there were 8 different voting precincts. This is the only one that had the Lincoln ticket on there. You know, this is the only one where we had a Lincoln ticket actually attached to that piece of paper. But you can see, that's the people's names over here. And that's the column in which that mark is who they voted for. Andy?
Yeah, did they do voice voting?
You know, that's something I'm not entirely clear, but yes, they did. It was oral voting. Now the question is, how did you do it? Did you walk up to a table and say, you know, they ask you, do you want West Virginia or do you want Lincoln? Who do you want for president? And you did that individually, or whether they did it as a group, whether they said, all right, everybody who's for Lincoln, go stand over here, or everybody, I'm not sure which way they did it, but either way, people knew how you voted. People knew how you voted. And what always blows me away, as I said, here's that 1860 presidential election. That's a really cool one. Then you have one when Virginia goes to the poll on May 23rd, 1861, on whether or not to leave the Union, on secession. So yeah, all these people, and you can see Richi County, when you get some of these precincts voted for secession. You know, that's more like the northern, you know, north central part of West Virginia. You wouldn't have thought of that, but there were a lot of people in that county that supported secession. I think it was something like 2-to-1 or something is what our numbers turned out. But it was pretty astounding. So we have, again, the record of how these people voted in this particular election. Then we have October 24th, 1861. We have a vote on whether or not to approve this new state of Kanawha. Of course, that's what West Virginia is going to be called eventually, but or what it will become West Virginia. But on this, it actually says, you know, you're for Kanawha or against Kanawha. So again, fascinating, fascinating. You're looking through here and you see all these people, because again, people knew how you voted. You're voting orally, whatever. You're showing people how you vote. So you got all these people who say, yes, I'm in favor of the new state. I'm in favor of the new state. How about this guy down here? They've erased his name because he's in the no column. He's like the only guy in this whole precinct who's voting against statehood. Can you imagine what his life might have been? I mean, he had to be a bold soul, right? To actually say, no, I'm against it. So to me, that's just remarkable. But the thing it enables you to do, and we set up a little database, and this is not for us to do, but this is for the scholars to do, to take it over from here. We created a little database, and you go through, and we've broken up by precinct, and you can go and see, well, this person voted for John Bell. And when it came to secession, he voted against it. And when it came to statehood, he voted for it. So I don't know what's to be drawn out of there necessarily, but there's a lot of information. And again, you've got those primary source documents to pull from. Really nice stuff. These are just some recent collections that have come into the state archives. Some good stuff. We collect, you know, it's not just big people's stuff. That's one of the things that we always need to stress. It's not just politicians. It's not just famous people whose papers that we collect. I'll be driving up to Greenbrier County to pick up a collection of Korean War letters that this woman's father passed away recently, and has a collection between her father and mother, and wants to donate that to the archives. It might be a program from a musical event that occurred. It might be some concert that occurred, you know, a program from that, or just a state publication, whatever it might be. Again, we seek to document the history of West Virginia. We collect everything we can get our hands on that fulfills that purpose. I'll stop rambling right there, surprisingly so. I mean, 45 minutes for me is amazing because I can usually ramble for a long, long time. So I'd be glad to take any questions that you have.
I've got a couple questions.
Yes, sir.
One is, like in terms of cultural items, how do you make the decision, okay, you know, when people call and somebody's died, they want to donate stuff or whatever, who makes the call and what's the criteria for saying, you know, this is worth preserving, or thank you very much, we really appreciate your interest. You know, like outside of the municipal auditorium, there's pictures of people who had performed here, you know, very nationally and internationally known people. So who makes that decision, and is there a criteria you just kind of, you know, make it as best you can?
Mary has been involved in writing.
He makes the decisions.
I make the final decision, yes. We will go places and look at things. And again, if it's original source material relating to West Virginia, I'm probably not going to turn it away. One of the things that we have had to cut back on is like genealogy type collections where people have traced their family history, and so we have 30 boxes of photocopies that they've made of census records and things like this. Because we are at this time pressed for space, you know, we are looking to collect primary source materials. Because we have county records in particular and other primary source materials that are in our sites right now, that's our focus. If we get unlimited space, you know, we would open up more. But we're not turning down original materials relating to the history of West Virginia.
Okay, the other question I had was about storage, like in terms of, like, let's say you have something that's valuable, you might have the original stored wherever, you know, let's say it's on a piece of paper, then like how many levels, like are you going to have a cloud storage space, you're going to have it on a flash drive, you're going to have it on a hard drive, or are you going to store things like in case of fire in different locations to where if there was a horrible fire, at least perhaps another, of course in the cloud, you know, and everything, and then whose cloud? Are you going to use Google's or Amazon's? Who might be, you know, gotten into by hackers or whatever? In other words, how do you all decide, you know, okay, we need 2 levels of backup, and we need 3 levels of backup, and we need, you know, and if we're going to store it somewhere else, where are we going to store it? Where do we get the funding for that? In other words, how do you go about making sure that you can preserve things for as long as possible?
Great question. In terms of creating secondary layers of materials, we have so much material, we're not going through duplicating things. If we're microfilming something, we're probably doing that in lieu of, like our newspapers, in lieu of keeping those physical papers, we're keeping it in microfilm form. In terms of the electronic records, Mary does the electronic records preservation, and a lot of what we are able to do is going to be dictated by the Office of Technology. We don't have free reign to buy any equipment that we want. We have to have approval for anything that we do. They will have to probably guide us in what our storage will be. We're working with them now, talking about cloud storage, talking about different ways, but Mary does a lot of her work on externals. We have to try to store off-site just to have another layer of backup, try to keep it out of the valley. But that's what we recommend for the county records when they do their digitizing, is that they, you know, multiple backups is crucial, and she does that as well. But we don't, you know, we have to be cautious in terms of creating a digital record that we're then going to commit ourselves to preserving forever. In other words, when we take in Joe Manchin's electronic records, we have to preserve those forever. You know, we got to find a way to keep those alive forever. But if I've got a photograph sitting there, if I scan it and then say I'm going to keep that as well, I'm going to preserve this and I'm going to preserve that, it does make things a little bit more difficult, given that we're kind of in our infancy of the electronic records part of things, would you say?
Well, yes.
Yeah, something you want to add to that?
No, other than, you know, when you start looking at things without getting too technical, making sure that however you're storing something, that you're maintaining the integrity of that electronic file becomes important. And obviously, if you get into things like cloud storage, in terms of evaluating them, you need to be sure that their processes don't alter your file.
When she takes electronic records, she runs checksums on them and comes up with this string of numbers that's specific to that file, and she can run that same test in 3 years or 5 years. And if any of those numbers have changed, something's happened to that file. And what she's saying is there's a concern that putting it in the cloud might cause those things to happen more frequently?
Well, that you need to make sure that whatever service you put it with, that they have procedures in place that would provide for the integrity of your files.
Other questions? I'm not sure that I entirely addressed what you're saying, but yeah, we are not creating multiple backups of things. A lot of our stuff, most of our stuff, that's it. That original document, that's it. Yes, ma'am.
I'm just fascinated by the voting.
Oh, yes.
Material from, I mean, can't think about it in terms of what about other counties? Is that the only county that you have voting? That's a unique situation.
It is. I saw something online one time that somebody had found, it may have been in Morgantown, that somebody had found a couple of the precincts or several of the precincts from Harrison County. They were talking about statehood and how there were actually more people voted against it and that kind of thing. So I didn't catch it all, but it was a partial. You know, they just had a few of the poll books or something. This was all of them. This was every precinct, all of those votes. So it just tells that complete story. And there's just so much that you could do analytically, I think, going through that. Looking at the precinct. Where is that precinct today? What part of that county is that in? Does that have a different political feel today? You know?
Oh, it would be so complex.
Yes.
It's really an amazing record.
Sure. Oh, it is. Yeah. Make sure before you leave that you check that out, because that is pretty cool, and I have not seen them before.
So historic, you know, it has such significance.
Absolutely. Any other questions? Again, I'm very appreciative for all of you coming out this evening and spending your time. We got done in under an hour. That's not too bad at all. As these guys know, for me, less than an hour, that's pretty daggone good. So thank you very much for coming. I appreciate it.